Hello, my name is Nick Robinson. I'm a medical student at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine Public Health, and I'm working with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery to bring you Saturday Night Chat. Saturday Night Chat is a monthly chat that creates a space for people to share their recovery journey and to show people in and seeking recovery that they are not alone and that recovery is possible. Today, we will be hearing from Elizabeth as she tells us a little bit about herself and her journey to recovery. So, with that, I'd like to thank Elizabeth for being here. And why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and what your journey through addiction and recovery has looked like thus far?
Okay, my name is Elizabeth. I am 54 years old and I am a recovering addict and alcoholic. My very first time using, I was 12 years old. I got blind, stinking drunk, got really sick, and swore I'd never do it again until the next time I did it. By the time I was 17, I was using pretty much everything under the sun. Smoking weed, doing acid, shrooms, popping pills, doing cocaine, you name it, I did it. The only time I was ever able to quit using was when I was pregnant with my kids. In July 18th of 2022, I had tried numerous times in that month, I'd say about 3 times in that month, to commit suicide. And I was homeless. I was squatting in the basement of an apartment building, and I had no job, and I basically didn't have a will to live. So I took the last of my money and I purchased some pills, ranging from opiates to sleeping pills and a 1.75-liter bottle of whiskey, and took the pills and drank the entire bottle in under 12 hours. I woke up 4 days later in the hospital. My blood alcohol content was 0.519, and I had put myself in a coma for 4 days. That was my rock bottom. Now, looking back, if you had told me that I would be a substance abuse counselor in training, working for an individual who, quite frankly, helped save my life, I probably would have laughed in your face and finished the pills in the bottle. But here I am. And I think, first and foremost, my higher power, which is God. I thank the nursing staff at the hospital because they didn't judge. Apparently, they had seen this before. And I thank all the people that I have met along the way that have supported me, from the program director, Miss Johnson, at my treatment facility, to my former counselor, who is now my boss, for training me and for telling me that it was okay to feel, that it was okay to be able to open up and be vulnerable and let all the negative things out to put more positive things in. My using spanned over 4 decades, and it took its toll. It really did. It took its toll on my family. It took its toll on me. It took its toll on any relationship that I had had. It had gotten to the point where that's all I wanted and that's all I needed. And if I didn't have it, I felt like I was going to die. I understand that a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction, that the question I used to get the most is, why can't you just stop? Why can't you just stop? Why can't you just quit? It's not that simple. It's a disease like cancer and diabetes. There's no cure. And when you get to the point that I was at, I couldn't survive without it. I was unable to quit. I wasn't capable of it. It had done the worst that it could do to me. And whew, um, I couldn't stop. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't stop. I tried. The longest I had ever been clean and sober was 4.5 years. And looking back on that time now, I realized that I was what you would call a dry drunk. I had physically clean and sober, but my mentality, my thinking, and my behavior were still that of an addict. A lot of people don't realize this, but I had also suffered from mental health, sexual abuse as a child by relatives and family members who were supposed to protect me. Multiple stepfathers because my mother got married multiple times. I was a loner. I mean, if you think about it, looking at what I know now, I was the prime candidate for this to happen. And then to find out that there are studies saying that it is hereditary. My grandfather passed away of alcohol-related cirrhosis of the liver. 3 of my uncles have lost their lives by their own hand due to some kind of addiction in any way, shape, or form. And my mother drank quite regularly. And I don't want to say that I was doomed before I even had a chance to live a life. But in a way, like I said, I was a prime candidate for this. It destroys. The disease of drug addiction and alcoholism has no ethnicity. It has no boundaries. It has no financial plateau. When you cannot control the disease and your life has become unmanageable and you are completely powerless over it, there is nothing that you won't do to get your next drink or your next fix. I am here talking with you, Nicholas, because I want people to know that it is possible. Recovery is possible. It is a very simple, very, what's the word? Very simple thing to do, but it's not easy. I will have to say that getting clean and sober was the hardest thing that I have had to do. And it is a fight that doesn't stop at the end of the day. It is a fight every minute, every hour. And when I wake up tomorrow morning, the boxing gloves come back on and I have to fight again. And it is a continuous, progressive fight, just like cancer and just like diabetes. There's no cure, but it is treatable and you can arrest it. You can treat it. And the way to treat it is to be willing to put it down and say, I need help. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be open-minded. And you have to be willing to accept help. Now, that one was the hardest for me. And the reason being is because I was the type of person, my favorite phrase was, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. That was me. I took care of everything. So for me to admit that something had me beat was inconceivable in my eyes and in my mind. I can do this. I got this licked. I got this beat. I can stop at any time. No, I couldn't. There was no way I could. Um, so the hardest part for me was asking for help. And I did that day when I woke up in the hospital. I looked at the nurse and I said, I'm tired of living like this. I need help. And they helped me. And I guess the rest is history. The first 3 months were horrible. I mean, absolutely horrible. And I kept every note and every lesson that I had learned in inpatient treatment. And the thing that got to me was I looked at my handwriting when I first started in treatment, and that was in August of 2022, to the time that I ended in November. My handwriting was atrocious because I still had the shakes. I still had the the sweats. I was still going through DTs, and it took me a minute to realize that I had destroyed my body physically and emotionally, but also in a physiological way. It took me, I was flabbergasted when I found out that it takes anywhere from 6 months to 3 years for your brain chemistry to go back to normal. And that's just with alcohol. That's not including all the other poison that I had put in my system. And I had also never realized that mental health was a big part of drug and alcohol addiction. And for those who don't know, it's called a co-occurring disorder. 9 times out of 10, you don't have one without the other, or vice versa. Either people have mental health and they use the drugs and alcohol to numb them and to help them maintain, or the drugs and alcohol can mask and cover up mental health. I personally suffer from anxiety, PTSD, depression, and obviously suicidal ideations. I'm glad that I am here to be able to talk to you today, simply for the fact that people need to know that this is out there, and that on an average, the United States alone spends over $770 million on resources for drugs, alcohol, and mental health. And it has just been within the last, I think, 5 years that they've come to the point where they know now that mental health and that addiction go pretty much hand in hand. And that's something that really needs also to be addressed, because you can get clean and you can get sober, but if you have underlying trauma that is causing mental health, like I do, if you have PTSD, like I do, if you suffer from social or basic anxiety, like I do, it really takes its toll on you. And you need to be able to treat both at the same time. I'm not ashamed to admit that I take medication for what I have. I'm not ashamed to admit that I suffer from trauma. It helps me relate in my job. It helps me relate on a personal level. It helps me relate in relationships. And it also allows me to be able to have an intimate relationship. And I'm not just talking about physical intimacy. I'm talking that personal relationship that you can have with an individual, that you're able to open up, and you're able to talk to somebody, and you're able to be vulnerable and not worry about getting hurt. That was a big thing for me. That and swallowing my pride and admitting that this disease had me beat.
Wow. I really, really appreciate you sharing your story with us, Elizabeth. It was really powerful, and there were so many themes that you touched on, from um, acceptance to swallowing pride to reaching out for help, that are all so important. I feel for anybody, but in particular people who are seeking recovery. Um, so I really appreciate you sharing all of that. Um, you mentioned a few things I'd like to touch on, and um, again, I really appreciate you sort of sharing your story of what ultimately led you to seeking recovery. I'd like to hear just a little bit more about, what aspects of recovery have been the most helpful for you, and what sorts of resources have you relied on since hitting your quote rock bottom that have ultimately kind of gotten you to the place where you are today, where you're well on your way into recovery?
Okay, first and foremost, it was the actual rock bottom when I finally came to the realization that I was powerless over my disease and my life had become unmanageable. Um, I was able to talk to the nurses that were in the ICU when I woke up, and the psychiatrist had come down and he said, "Are you willing to do an evaluation?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I was put in a psychiatric ward for 8 days in a lockdown unit. And and I went to all the meetings and I went to all the groups and I got all the information that I could possibly get. Now, I considered myself an intelligent person, but when it came to realizing that I needed help to beat this disease, or at least treat it the way it's supposed to be treated, that I needed to completely reevaluate everything that I believed in. And a very wise friend, my former counselor, told me, when you walk into a treatment room or you walk into an inpatient, you are 100%. 10% is the drugs, 45% is your behavior, and 45% is your thinking. So it's okay to want to get help, and it's okay to want to get clean and sober. But you have to retrain your brain as well. We used to call it stinking thinking. You needed to look at how you behaved, the compulsiveness, the self-centeredness, the attitudes that you had, the manic episodes going up and down like a roller coaster. When you are in active use, your thinking is irrational and your behavior is distorted. I mean, everything is distorted and irrational. So you need to feel those emotions, because now that you're not using, you don't have the drugs to mask that. You have to feel. And that, I would have to say, was the scariest thing for me, because it wasn't, a gradual thing. It was waking up and wanting to laugh, cry, and punch a hole in the wall all at the same time. It was a floodgate had opened. And that's when I realized that I didn't not only have to treat my disease, I had to treat all the trauma that my disease masked for all of those decades. Um, there was a session when I was in inpatient treatment, and it was about self-esteem. And because of everything that I had been through, the trauma and the abuse, both physical, psychological, sexual, emotional, I did not know how to deal with how I was feeling. I had a lot of hurt and a lot of anger. And those were the two that fueled me for so long. And the drugs kind of numbed that. And I couldn't do that anymore. I had to come to terms with life. I had to come to terms with the trauma that I had suffered. I had come to terms with the death of my son. And I had been drinking, and you would think that I had been drinking and using drugs, and you would have thought that, the loss of your child would have been the rock bottom, but it wasn't. And then you have to deal with the guilt and the shame. And then you have to deal with the fear of what other people will think. When you come and say, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict, I'm an alcoholic and addict, and I need help. Destigmatizing addiction and putting it where it properly belongs, which is a disease that is treated, but you have to be ready. And if you're not ready, you can't do it. Like I said, it's something so simple. Work the program. There's the 12 steps of AA. 12 steps of AA are based on the Bible. You read the Bible. You have to know that a power greater than you can restore your sanity. You have to turn your will and your life over to the power of God as you understand Him. You have to be able to look inside of yourself. This was one of the hardest things for me. Step number 4, doing a searching and fearless moral inventory of yourself. And that step alone, I must have done it 5 or 6 times. And my searching and fearless moral inventory was close to 9 pages the first time I did it. And it was all negative. And then somebody pulled me aside, my program director and counselor in treatment. She pulled me aside and she says, your searching and fearless moral inventory is everything, not just the negative. It's everything. Everything you've accomplished, your children, the love and pride you had in them, the education you received, the accolades that you accomplished. It's all of that. And a lot of people don't realize that doing that searching and fearless moral inventory is a great way for you to work the honest program. Because if you can't be honest with yourself, that's what the how-to in recovery is all about. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And then you have to think before you speak. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspirational? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Every single addict, when a newcomer walks into a meeting, every single addict knows that newcomer is the most important person in that room, because they are vulnerable. They are feeling alone, isolated, guilty, ashamed of not only their usage, but of the behavior and the attitude that went along with it. And if they're willing and they are honest and they are open-minded to surrender their will and their lives over to the care of God as they understand them, it's a spiritual awakening. And I believe that you should be able to get the help that you need. It's one of the reasons why I'm in the field that I'm in today and that I'm training, because I feel that I can help people by letting them know that you're not alone, that it's okay. And this is what an honest recovery program looks like. That if you put in the work, you work the steps, you work an honest program, you do a moral inventory on a daily basis, you spread the message, because you can't get the reward unless you're giving it. And that is one thing that I am constantly aware of, is that you make those meetings, you talk to those people, because there are people in those rooms that have decades and decades of clean time. So obviously something's working for them, and you have to be able to actively listen when they tell you a part of their story. It's very powerful and it's very emotional, and it is also very rewarding.
Yeah, thank you for kind of sharing your insights into your recovery and touching on different themes that have been really important throughout this recovery process, from working the 12 steps to finding community within the AA community, touching on stigma. These are all really, really good things. And you also mentioned that you've worked to a point now where you're in training to become, from my understanding, a substance use counselor. Would you be able to speak more as to what kind of led you to get to this point? What was your motivation to take on this training? And what's ultimately your goal with kind of becoming a substance use counselor?
Well, I've always been a nurturer. Like I said, my favorite phrase was, "Don't worry about it, I'll take care of it." When my kids were growing up, my house was the safe house. My daughter's friends, if they were in trouble or if they got into, something going on in their personal life and they just needed a safe place to be them, for them to be able to be themselves, they could come to my house. I was an only child, and I had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. And as I mentioned earlier, my son passed away in February of 2001. And it took for me to start working my honest program to be able to forgive myself. So that was 21 years of guilt, which also led to more drinking and more using. And I realized that I had something to offer. When I realized that I wasn't alone in all of these feelings that I was feeling, and the guilt and the shame and the uselessness and this lack of self-worth and the lack of self-respect. I mean, whatever negative spin you want to put on it, I had it. I could not look in the mirror without seeing a monster up until about a year ago. And actually, no, I'd say about 6 months ago. It got to the point where my counselor said, "I want you to write 15 positive affirmations and put them on your wall. And then I want you to look in the mirror and say, 'I love you. Beth, I love you.'" And I could not do it. I could not do it to save my life. I can do it now. I can look in the mirror and actually like the person that I see reflected. And that took a lot of hard work. when you go up to a person who really doesn't have any insight into the disease of addiction and alcoholism, and you tell them, I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic, they look at you like you just sprouted horns and a tail. And that's the stigma. People will look at me and say, no, not you. Well, why not me? Like I said, it has no barriers. It will attack the rich, it will attack the poor, it will attack the white person, the black person, the Asian. I mean, you name it, it'll hit you. It will hit you. I felt that once I started this journey, that I could help people, that I could help them know that, how can I phrase this without sounding like an idiot? That I could help them know that they're not alone, and that there are people out there that care enough about them to want to see them succeed. And when they succeed, you succeed. I shared, I facilitate an outpatient group 2 times a week, well, 1 to 2 times a week. And I shared a little bit of my story with them. And I let them know that each and every person in that room has each other's backs, that they are there to support them, that it's a safe place, and that by sharing, you get that positive feedback, because there are some things that you think you know that you really don't know. And there are some things that the person sitting next to you can look at you and go, I know exactly how you feel. And you know they're telling the truth. They can look at you with a newfound respect and admiration for you, because you're willing to open that part up of yourself and get rid of that ickiness that you have inside of you and fill it with something good. So when I had a lot of people throughout my recovery tell me, you'd make a great counselor. You're smart. You make a great counselor. You know, you did a, and I heard it so much that it was like, maybe I should, you know. I was the house manager at my sober living facility, and everybody was coming up to me. They knew that I could keep their confidence. If they didn't want to share it in group, you know, I would pull them aside and we would talk individually. And one day I just, you know, left it to my higher power, and I said, whatever, you know, you decide for me, whatever path you have for me, I'll follow, because obviously I screwed it up royally over 42 years trying to do it myself. I mean, that's the whole definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And one day I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, how would you like a job? And I said, sure, what do you want? She goes, you can be a substance abuse counselor in training. And I said, are you kidding me? And it was odd, because a few months prior to that, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he asked me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, I see myself as a substance abuse counselor. Well, that happened 4 years and 6 months earlier than what I had thought. But when she offered that to me, and I'm like, okay, this is my higher power landing me my golden opportunity right in my lap. I prayed upon it. I left it in my higher power. So I left it in God's hands, and this is how he delivered it. And it's amazing when your higher power gives you, when you ask for something and your higher power gives you what you need, and it is not how you expect it. It's always those precious gifts that when you are able to, I don't know, when you're able to open up to somebody and they give you a golden nugget of information, and to you it's the biggest treasure, and to them it's like, yeah, that happens to me all the time. And it's like, wait a minute, what? That's the wonderful thing about this program. It's like a Timex. It keeps on giving, and it keeps on pushing you, and it keeps on motivating you. So for me, it just seemed natural to be a substance abuse counselor. It just seemed natural to be able to do mental health and dealing with all the anger and the pain, because I lived it. I lived it for so long. And I want to be able to show people, not only talk the talk, if you will, but walk the walk as well. That you can get over this, that these are just obstacles. There's a saying, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because everything in recovery is uncomfortable. I mean, everything. And you need to be able to get comfortable with that feeling of ickiness, for lack of a better word. I can't think of anything offhand, but you need to get comfortable with that feeling if you're going to overcome it, if you're going to face it and accept it and deal with it. You have to live life on life's terms, because I keep telling people, if I use it again, I die. Plain and simple. There's no coming back. I'm going to be 55 at the end of the year. I have no second chances. I've burned all those second chances and third chances and fourth chances. They're gone. It's this or death. I think in how it works, the alternative is despair, institution, and death. That is in the big book of AA. It's in the big book of NA and CA. Yeah, you need to be able to surrender. And it's a very simple concept, but it is the hardest thing that you're going to do.
And I can only imagine, how valuable sharing your own experiences through addiction recovery are towards the other people who you will be, engaging with as a substance abuse counselor in the future. I can only imagine how helpful that's going to be for them to hear, to just have someone, tell them that I've been there, I know what this feels like, and you can make it through as well. I mean, that's gotta be so affirming. So I really commend you for what you're doing. And as we're wrapping up here, for anyone who continues to struggle on their recovery journey, what advice or words would you offer them right now?
That struggle is part of life. That, again, you need to accept life on life's terms. To have a healthy recovery support system. If you are struggling in your recovery, go to a meeting, because those are the times when you are like, I don't want to go to a meeting. I don't feel like. Those are the times that you need to go. Reach out to somebody that is in recovery, that is clean and sober, that has some clean time, and ask them, can we go out for coffee? I really need to talk. I'm struggling with this. I need help. And that is the hardest thing for a person in recovery to do, because we have to swallow that pride. We have to look inside of ourselves and say, well, shit, I've tried doing this myself so many times. How come it didn't work? Well, because you're trying to do it by yourself. That's the whole point of the beauty and the reward of an honest recovery, is There's a fellowship. There are people that you can talk to. There are meetings. You can walk into those rooms and you know that you are not alone, and that somewhere in one of these rooms, there is someone who went through just what you're going through now, that there is a solution to the problem. And picking back up and using again is not the solution. So make sure when you go into, if you're ready, if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, go into a AODA treatment, work an honest program, talk to a substance abuse counselor, talk to a mental health professional, because every single one of these people can help you in your journey. And without them, they can lead you to the meetings. They can give you the information of Narcotics Anonymous. They can tell you who you can talk to. The crisis helpline. I know Milwaukee County Behavioral Health has an excellent crisis hotline. Vital Strategies, Voices for Recovery. There are so many resources out there. Harm reduction, there's pop-up events everywhere for harm reduction. They have the information and resources for you. You're not alone, and it's okay to ask for help. That is the biggest thing. If somebody is going through a struggle and they're struggling in their recovery and they're making the meetings, then they need to talk to somebody because they're missing something. They're missing something in their recovery that is allowing them. Either they haven't surrendered completely, or their thinking hasn't been changed, or their behavior is still an addictive behavior. You have to be honest with yourself, first and foremost. If you're not honest with yourself, your recovery is not going to work. You have to be honest with yourself. And once you get honest with yourself, you start to see, hey, that, that place, I used to use in that place, or I remember getting blind stinking drunk in that bar. Stay away from it, avoid it. Or, my friend says, I can't understand why you can't just have 2 or 3 drinks, because I'm an alcoholic. I can't go to the bar with you. As a matter of fact, if you drink in front of me, I can't be with you. Avoid the people, places, and things that will trigger you. Be able to identify that this is a disease and that you have no control over it. Be able to know what your triggers are. People don't understand how intelligent they can be once they open up their mind to the possibility that there is a better life, that there is a different way of living. Getting into a good recovery program is it's key. It's tantamount. You definitely need it. You need to be able to, my personal advice, if somebody were to come to me and say, I'm in active usage, but I'm sick and tired of living this way, what do I do? First thing I tell them is to go to detox. Then I tell them to go to at least a 90-day inpatient treatment. Then I tell them to go into a sober living facility, or a sober living facility, and get intensive outpatient therapy, cognitive therapy. They will give you the tools that you need to cope with those feelings that you have masked with the drugs for so long. You need tools in the toolbox, and that's one of the big things. You have to have a coping skill. My personal favorite is prayer and meditation. I also like to walk. I listen to music. I do pop-up events in the community with harm reduction and outreaches, training people how to use Narcan in case of an overdose. We can't tell people, oh, you need to quit, you need to quit, you need to quit. They're not going to listen to that. But if you give them the Narcan and show them how to use it, because they don't want to die, and nobody wakes up one day and say, oh, I'm going to be an addict and alcoholic. Doesn't happen like that. It didn't take you to get to this point in your using overnight, and it's not going to take overnight to fix. It's a progression, and it is a lifelong progression. My former counselor has 37 years of clean time, and she is constantly working her program. So it doesn't matter if you have 36 hours or 36 years. You need to work it on a daily basis. You need to incorporate each and every one of the 12 steps into your program. Otherwise, you're going to fail.
Yeah, so many great takeaways there. I'd really like to thank you again, Elizabeth, for taking the time today to share your story with us. I certainly took a lot out of it. I know that others who tune in will really take a lot out of hearing your story. And I'd like to wish you all the best with your training and your future as a substance abuse counselor. It sounds like a really good role for you. And yeah, I think people need to continue to hear your story.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share it. I'm used to sharing in meetings, not talking to my tablet. But yeah, for somebody so new into my recovery like I am, it'll be 14 months on the 18th of this month that I have been clean and sober. And I go to my meetings and they ask me to greet the newcomers because of what I've been through. I mean, to look at me, you wouldn't think that I was in active usage for 42 years. But this is what an honest recovery looks like, and that it's possible. And if I can do it, you certainly can do it. They certainly can do it. So when I go to my meetings, I have like 6 or 7 meetings that I attend on a regular basis. They always say, oh, this particular person, he's a newcomer. Could you, just kind of greet him and talk to them? The next thing I know, I'm having coffee and we're exchanging numbers, and I keep my phone on 24/7, and I answer the call because I know what it was like at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, feeling alone and useless and just wanting everything to end because I didn't have anybody on that other end of the phone to call. And that's one of the biggest things that I make sure that anybody that I come in contact with that is wanting an honest recovery, I give them my number and I tell them you can call me anytime, day or night, because that is the one thing that people need. They need to know that there's somebody out there that cares, that will work with them, that will have some good advice and suggestions, and saying, instead of saying, what the hell are you doing calling me at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning? I can't believe you're pulling this shit. They don't need to hear that. They need to hear, hey, what's going on? You want to go out? You want to go out for coffee? You need to talk? I'm here. Listen, just listen. That's basically what most people need. They want to know that somebody hears them. So yeah, I appreciate, and I am honored and humbled that you gave me the opportunity to be able to share this. And I hope if it just helps one person that sees it, then I've succeeded. And I'd be the happiest person on earth.
Well, I think we've accomplished that here today. So again, I want to thank you, Elizabeth, for your time. I think we'll wrap it up here, and we'll see you at the next Saturday Night Chat.
Sounds like a plan. You have a good weekend, okay?
You too. Bye now.
Thanks.